want to risk his life in a war when the best that he can get out of it is to come back to his farm in one piece. Naturally, the common people don't want war, neither in Russia, nor in England, nor in America, nor for that matter in Germany. That is understood. But after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy, or a fascist dictatorship, or a parliament, or a communist dictatorship. Gilbert is troubled by this. And he says, I mean, I could kiss the guy. Bless his heart. It's heartbreaking. He says, there is one difference, I pointed out. In a democracy, the people have some say in the matter through their elected representatives. And in the United States, only Congress can declare wars. Oh, that is all well and good, Goering replies. But voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That's easy. All you have to do is tell them that they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country. Okay? It's not controversial. Now, where's the left in all this? Okay? The more persuasive the 9/11 truth movement becomes, and the more people go online and pick stuff up that the mainstream media doesn't want them to know, and the more young people come of age unintimidated by the conspiracy theory meme. That's very important, and I've noticed this in my own classes. It keeps me going. It's like homophobia. I mean, they don't really care, you know? They'll kind of look at the evidence and have a normal, sane reaction to it. The easier it gets, the more promising our prospects, the more the state ramps up their drive against us, slanderous and subversive efforts to cripple the movement. You may know that David Cameron last fall, in a speech before the UN, said that conspiracy theory is as dangerous as ISIS. Okay? And he meant what we're doing, conspiracy theory. Recently, Francois Hollande, the socialist president of France, equated conspiracy theory with Nazism. Because, of course, anti-Semitism is based on an ancient conspiracy theory, you know, Jewish machinations, etc. You know. And here in our own country, as I'm sure you know, because the choir is here, Cass Sunstein, who's working for President Obama, co-wrote a piece for a journal published by Harvard University on cognitive infiltration that is using trolls deliberately to subvert discussions of 9/11 online. I mean, he actually talked about the necessity of disabling this dangerous terroristic discourse by using agents to go online posing as sympathizers, picking fights. I have no doubt also people will go on a 9/11 site and start talking about the protocols of the Elders of Zion and the Jewish world conspiracy, so that the 9/11 movement gets tarnished with a kind of neo-Nazi brush. I mean, if I were doing this kind of thing, that's what I would do. So, you know, this isn't just empty words we're talking about. This is a kind of manifest preparation to criminalize the kind of discussion we're having and to use all the powers of the state to shut it down. Now, where's the left? Where's the left in all this? Where is it? Let's go back to 67 when the CIA sent out this memo. Right around the same time, Ramparts, you know, the leftist magazine, was breaking these amazing stories about what the CIA was up to. In 66, they broke the story of how Michigan State University had played a crucial role in propping up the Diem dictatorship in South Vietnam. A professor at MSU, Stanley Scheinbaum, blew the whistle on this because he was actually involved in the program and he realized they were training police at Michigan State University. This was broken by ramparts. The following year, they broke the story of the National Student Association being subsidized by the CIA. That story exploded in the mainstream press. The New York Times did an excellent job following up on that story, interviewing kids who had unwittingly been dragged into the CIA operation, threatened with long federal jail terms if they told anybody about it. I mean, it was really harrowing. I cannot imagine anything like that happening now. I don't see the left any longer doing those kinds of exposés. And I believe that if you study the history of the New York Review of Books and The Nation, even the New York Times Book Review, and other publications like that, do a content analysis of those publications from then through the 70s and to now, you'll see that this kind of explosive content just stops. It stops. We don't see it anymore. And now we've come to the point where some of our most illustrious fellow leftists actually go out of their way to disavow any kind of discussion like the discussion we're having. I'm going to read you, I'm concluding with this. This is a passage from Disaster Capitalism by Naomi Klein, a work that's the subject of a panel here at the Left Forum, a book that I deeply admire, and I think the world of her, and she's kind of a friend of mine. Nevertheless, I am struck by this passage. When the September 11th attacks hit, the White House was packed with Milton Friedman's disciples, including Donald Rumsfeld. The Bush team seized to the moment of collective vertigo with chilling speed, not, as some have claimed, because the administration deviously plotted the crisis, but because the key figures of the administration, veterans of earlier disaster capitalism experiments in Latin America and Eastern Europe, were part of a movement that prays for crisis the way drought-struck farmers pray for rain and the way Christian Zionist end-timers pray for the rapture. When the long-awaited disaster strikes, they know instantly that their moment has come at last. So they didn't have anything to do with its happening. They were just poised. Poised to write the Patriot Act in 12 hours. You ever seen it? Yeah. Right? They just quickly wrote that because they were praying for a crisis, and it struck. It's like, great, quick, hurry up. Let's get a few people and write that Patriot Act. Right? Now, what's especially remarkable about this is that Naomi Klein knows that the U.S. had actually itself been involved in some of those earlier disaster capitalism experiments in Latin America. It's in the same book. It's about 60 pages later. She talks about how the CIA and ITT worked to destroy Chilean democracy by arranging for the Pinochet coup. She writes very intelligently about this. That it wasn't like the U.S. was praying for a coup in Chile and then acted with chilling speed to take advantage of it. That coup was their doing. She knows this. What I therefore conclude, and this is a direct response to what you said a moment ago, is that Naomi Klein just doesn't want to go there. I don't think it's a calculation. I think it's an instinctive thing. You go there, you are off the reservation. You are basically asking to be shot, metaphorically speaking. It's professional suicide. You're asking to be Gary Webbed. You know what you understand? Gary Webb was, his life was destroyed by the charge of conspiracy theory. And I know journalists personally even journalists who've written about some of the major conspiracies of the last 30 years, they become anxious to the point of belligerence if you talk to them about this stuff. They don't want to go there, and it upsets them to be asked to go there. Because on some level, being serious journalists, they know that they should go there, right? But this has been such a successful effort to stigmatize a particular kind of necessary investigation that our journalists across the political spectrum have been disabled by it, you know? And I've seen it with, you know, election fraud. When Michael Moore, you know, another friend, announced right after the 2004 election on his website that it was not stolen. It just wasn't, you know? So the question becomes, how do we deal with this? You know, I know a lot of people on the left, colleagues at NYU, staunch left people coming to this event who don't even know some of the basic stuff about what the 9/11 truth movement has unearthed. They have never heard it. It's like it's in a bad part of town and they would never go there. You know, they just have stayed away. So they ask a sort of fundamental question that just leaves you gaping. You know, and you have to reinvent the wheel and tell them all the stuff, you know. And sometimes they'll, yeah, wow, that's interesting. But that's the end of it. You know, they won't then become interested enough to devote attention to it and circulate, because it's disreputable. You know, it's disreputable. So that's the challenge here. You know,
It's not for polite conversation.
no, it's not. It's not. So that's. I'll stop there.
What was the date of that Chilean coup?
1973.
What date?
Oh, 9/11. Yes, yes, yes.
Great.
Thank you, it was great.
See you soon.
Well, we'll do a little Q&A now, and then we'll go on to, I think there's a desire here. Okay, show of hands. There. We'll take 3 now, and then we'll move on. Okay.
Yeah, where you left off on journalists, it's remarkable that I guess you're still at NYU. Could you say something about tenure, not only in universities, but in public schools where teachers are under attack, where tenure is under attack? If you teach history in a public school, or English or anything, it's very...
Okay, we got it. Thank you.
There is no doubt that the higher education and public education are under concerted attack, right? The teachers' unions are under attack. Tenured faculty are under attack. You know, this is partly and largely an economic mission, you know, to basically get rid of the most expensive employees and replace them with much lower paid and more insecure workers, contract workers. We see it happening in the universities, in the high schools, and so on. But there's also a crucial ideological dimension to this. These are neoliberal forces that are trying to wipe out the academic space for critical discussion of the kind that we're having here. I think that's clearly going on. It should be and probably is the subject of whole panels at this conference. I don't personally feel that I'm at any risk at NYU because, I mean, I'm part of a big drive to attack NYU for its real estate adventures in Greenwich Village, and we're suing the city right now for approving their planned 2 million square foot expansion downtown. We have oral arguments before the U.S. Court of Appeals on Tuesday. So, you know, it's a serious fight. And even with that, I don't feel endangered, partly because I've always felt that if you have tenure, no matter where, the more prominent you are as a critic, the safer you are, because it just looks terrible if they go after somebody who people have heard of, you know.
Great, thank you. Question? Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah. I just want to make a comment. I was thinking, since you were talking about it, that probably, Les, you should put this very significant social fact that we're describing up in your consequences, because it's the internalization of the understanding of this, the disciplining of discourse in this country, and this goes all the way back to the Red Scares. And people are very clear, I would like to say, especially about Naomi Klein in that book, because that was, I think, 2002 when it was published. I mean, it's not just that if you say certain things, you commit professional suicide. It's also true that if you say other things and don't say those, you get social promotion. and you achieve, you are playing a fundamental role, which I won't characterize here. So I would like some further comments on that, because this, the charge of conspiracy is something that people actually anticipate in their own minds. It leads to a form of epistemological, I guess you could say, rupture with rationality. And I think that that mental thing where you control what you're going to say, or you have gradations of it, is a very significant social fact in this country, and has been all the way back to the 30s and before.
Well, that's true, but I wouldn't say that's a consequence of 9/11. That's kind of the ground of everything that's happened. It prevents us from recognizing that this has all happened, and prevents us from discussing that this has happened, you know.
We could say that it's been exacerbated, I think, though.
Yes, it's been exacerbated because we're all at risk. We're all at risk of being, hurt in another terrorist attack.
And what came to mind is Christina Borgensen, right? She has spoken about her experience in covering the Flight
800.
Flight 800,
TWA.
TWA, and then also journalists like her have commented on the shrinking of the ability for investigative journalists to survive because of budgets. Because of budgets. We have to shrink this. Bob, we're going to shrink that right there. But no, this is very real. The shrinking of support, financial support within the press for investigative journalism, I think we could argue is also a consequence of 9/11. So I just want to add that. Let's see, we have here and then here.
I don't have a solution, but I'm wondering what you think of sort of a theory I have as to why the left is so adverse to this. And that is because back in the day, in the early 60s, there was the left and then the new left. And so the new left were younger, very radical, and they understood the Gulf of Tonkin, the 9/11 of our day, of that era. And so they considered themselves radical, and now those very same people, many of those people are the eminence grise of the movement. They're the establishment, they're the left establishment, yet in their mind they're still living in the past. They think they're radical. And they are on the marionette stage, and on that marionette stage they have a part. Granted, they're on the left side, but they're on the stage, and they don't want to get off that stage and look at who is doing the marionetteering. And so I feel that part of it is they own control of the conversation, and they know how far the electronic collar will take them right up to the border of the reservation. And it's because they're living in the past, and they are now, don't trust anyone over 30, that's now them, but they don't realize that they are now who the enemy was that they saw at the time.
Well, of course, that kind of thing will happen in any case as a generation ages.
It doesn't have to, though.
Well, it doesn't have to,
and
but
why
I
has it?
think we have to place this discussion within the larger context of what happened to the left after the 60s. There was an enormous, extraordinarily well-funded counter-revolution by business and the government that really succeeded in shattering the left in part, I'd say in large part, by promoting identity politics, which sort of supplanted economic analysis and a class-based critique in favor of a kind of race and gender agenda, which is extremely important and helpful in many ways, but it also sort of depoliticizes discussions and has resulted in giving us a choice of, Hillary Clinton for president, because she'll be the first woman president. It's also enabled us to, many Americans, all too many Americans, Democrats and liberals, to tolerate what Obama does and apologize for it and defend it, even though if Bush had done anything like this, they'd go nuts. It's extremely dangerous, and it has everything to do with the dilution of left politics by identity politics and so on. Moreover, student debt has had the understandable effect of inhibiting younger people who are not as ready to hit the streets or protest as the people you're talking about were. And I'm really getting tired of hearing people, boomers, criticize the young for not being as radical as they were. You know, it's a completely different world in which young people are looking at the prospect of lifelong peonage and no job, you know? So they're not about to jeopardize what little chance they have, you know, by going out and getting arrested, particularly when the police, as you pointed out, have become a really lethal force since the 60s. I mean, it was bad enough at the 68 Chicago Convention. It was just billy clubs. You know, now it's like RoboCop, you know, because they got all this Patriot Act money, and you're taking your life in your hands if you protest. Anybody who just says, oh yeah, let them go out in the streets is being really irresponsible, you know? So the whole landscape of the left has changed beyond recognition.
And then also, of course, they wiped out the whole layer of leadership of Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy. They assassinated our main leader. So who's going to step into a place that is ripe for assassination?
Absolutely.
Question?
Actually, just a footnote.
Yes.
With regard to Cass Sunstein, it should be pointed out that hideous paper, Cognitive Dissidence, I believe was published before Obama appointed Sunstein to a position in the government.
Is that right?
Yes. Sunstein, for I believe about 2 years, was either in the cabinet or a sub-cabinet position.
Right.
Talk about currying favor. A previous speaker, I think, has very correctly pointed out that there are both negatives and positives. And one can see Sunstein writing that paper with an eye to an appointment by the liberal Obama administration. And he got it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Right?
It's fascinating. Because this is a guy who specializes in First Amendment law.
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
His middle name is Kafka.
Interesting, not surprising.
Who's his wife?
Okay, we're gonna two more questions, then we're gonna move on and then come back to questions.
I just wanted to point out what you said before about, you know, they perpetuate wars and then, you know, create all this lawlessness, like they could take the people's rights away because, oh, we're in a war, so anything goes. But I mean, it's obvious that it should be the other way around. I mean, the rights of the people should be protected under war, not stripped.
It never happens that way.
I mean, you know, I feel like it should be the other way around.
It's contrary to the reality. Okay, folks, can we make it, okay, real quick, and then we have to move on.
All right, look, in the Nation magazine, they made an attack against 9/11 people. They called them idiots. And the Progressive magazine also, a few others. Why is that? Can you comment on, are they being paid by the
Also,
CIA or what
the
do you think?
Independent refuses to allow any.
I know.
Mother
Okay.
Jones also.
That's a very important question. I can answer it. Some length, okay. I noticed when Fooled Again came out, this is directly relevant to your question. I said it was blacklisted, and I was struck by the following. By and large, the mainstream media ignored the book. It was actually attacked primarily on the left. Okay, it was Mother Jones that attacked it. It was The Nation that attacked it. Salon that attacked it. Now, why is that? Okay, to broaden the discussion, there are a number of reasons why the left doesn't want to go where we want them to go. Partly, it's just denial, the same kind of denial that other people who aren't on the left are afflicted with. They just don't want to go there. They don't want to think about it because the implications are too horrific and too challenging. Much more comfortable to just restrict yourself to environmental activism and reproductive freedom and all the other, you know, it's kind of like the street fair conception of politics. You go from table to table, you pick up different flyers. Oh, I'll do a little of this and a little of that. When it comes to 9/11, when it comes to stolen elections, those are just fundamental assaults that you can't, like, just partly get involved in. And people just don't want to go there. There are also people on the left who are kind of complicit one way or another. You know, often funding has something to do with it. You know, if you are funded by a particular foundation that doesn't want you to go there, you're not going to go there. And I think that this probably helps explain why a Free Press is an activist organization that promotes, you know, policies that will make the press less vulnerable to commercial interests. You know, it's a great organization, but they refuse ever at their conferences to allow anyone to discuss election fraud. It just can't come up. They won't talk about it, and I think it has to do with their funding. Okay, let's be frank. There's also the fact that there are some on the left who aren't really leftists. Okay, if you read widely in the literature of the CIA, you know, you read Philip Agee's Inside the Company. You know, like everybody should read this. It should be assigned to every high school student. You know, he talks about, it's in diary form, so he talks about what they did every day in the CIA offices in Uruguay and in Ecuador and in Mexico. He spent 10 years in the CIA in the 60s. And, you know, they had the leading liberal columnist in Ecuador on the CIA payroll. They gave him stuff to run as his own columns, you know. I mean, you know, in other words, abroad, the CIA has always co-opted liberal and socialist journalists and artists as part of their, you know, endless drive against the Soviet Union. All right, so why wouldn't that kind of thing happen here? I mean, the most striking example is Daily Kos. You know, Markos Molitsas founded Daily Kos. Do you know the story of this guy? Somebody outed him as having trained at the CIA. This is Daily Kos. He founded Daily Kos. It's probably the most influential website related to Democratic Party politics. And he was outed as having trained at the CIA, and he admitted it. I think it was before the Commonwealth Club. He said, yeah, I did. He said, the CIA is a very liberal organization, he said. Which in a certain sense is true, you know? But it turns out that he comes from a very wealthy, coffee-growing family in El Salvador. Okay? Well, how come he's this big liberal mover and shaker? What's up with that? Now, the reason why I mention this is that after the 2004 election, he laid down a diktat. He said there is not going to be any discussion of that election being stolen on Daily Kos. He forbid it. It wasn't going to happen. Forget it. Now, since then, some of the blogs on Daily Kos, people will write about it, but when it comes to the stuff that's edited, no, forget it. Okay, I have to ask myself, why is that? What is up with that? Why? And Nate Silver, okay, Nate Silver, the beloved, you know, statistics expert, and now writes for the New York Times, got his start at Daily Kos, and he's basically in the business of constantly assuring us that this or that election wasn't stolen, and that exit polls are not reliable. It's just a piece the other day by him to this effect. Exit polls aren't reliable. So whatever insane outcome we see in election, and we're seeing them all the time now, and election after election, surprise victories by the right. It happened in Britain. It happened in Israel. It happened with the Scottish independence vote. It happened with Proposition 8 in LA, and it's happened with election after election after election in this country at the congressional and gubernatorial levels. It happened to Scott Walker and his people 4 times now in Wisconsin, right? To have a very influential columnist for the Times assure us that exit polls are all wet and that there's really no such thing as fraud is questionable. It's questionable.
Okay.
Did I answer you?
Yes.